I'd like to continue on with our discussion of the four pillars of composition. In this segment, I'd like to focus on eye lines, and then we'll move on to discuss point of view. What are eye lines? Well, there's a couple of different kinds of eye lines. There are physical eye lines, there's perspective eye lines using foreground, middle ground, and background. There's tonal and color transitions. Basically, any element or series of elements that helps move the eye across the image. And as we're going to see as we go through this segment of the course, is that good asymmetry helps create eye lines. And in this particular image, we see the real strong eye lines in this image are physical eye lines. All right, the first example here, where these snags, these burnt-out snags, are racing towards the sky and almost forming a vanishing point up here, if you will. This image took me about 20 minutes to shoot because I worked so hard on getting good separation. We talked about that in previous video, between all these snags in the sky. But I thought this was so compelling in terms of the eye lines. And notice how, and very importantly here, that the vertical or portrait framing of the image, the orientation, matches the vertical eye lines. They complement each other. Well, let's move forward and take a look at a couple of the images with some examples of good eye lines, and then we'll take a look at some that aren't so good. In this image, we clearly have some good physical eye lines, right? This was shot in Ketchimek Bay on Bishop Beach, where I live in Homer, and camera right next to the ripples, right? And beautiful, strong eye lines. How can your eye not move across this image? Of course, what's critical here technically is that everything has to be in focus from very near foreground all the way to the back, which you accomplish, of course, with lens choice, critical plane of focus, and a good high f-stop. But this has both physical lines and it has perspective because there's foreground, middle ground in here, and then background. But the real strong ones here, again, are those physical lines. Remember, any element that moves the eye across the image, right? And this one is particularly strong physical lines. This is an image with some subtle as well as some obvious eye lines in them. Well, there's clearly physical lines, as you see across here. How can your eye not move across that one? But there's also some subtle ones that are also pretty powerful and important. The next one is perspective, because we do have foreground and way foreground here with a little bit of beach showing. We talked about how important that was to asymmetry. Foreground, middle ground, and then background. The eye moves, making this image dynamic. But there's also a very strong tonal gradation, right? From dark all the way to light, and then dark to light again. That helps move the eye across the image, no doubt about it. Again, any element that moves the eye across the image is an eye line. This image has some very interesting eye lines. There's certainly a physical eye line created by this lone spruce tree and its beautiful cast shadow. And this is called shadow dreaming. So there's a beautiful physical eye line there. And there's somewhat of a perspective eye line, foreground, middle ground created by that one tree back there, and then, of course, the background sky. That's not as strong as the physical eye line that we see here. But there is a very strong tonal eye line. And the very strong tonal eye line starts from pure black and comes all the way over here to, in fact, blown out white highlight where the sun was in the upper right-hand corner of the image. There's also a diagonal line, again, which moves from left to right along this gradient. There's some secondary eye lines that augment the rest of the eye lines in the image. This nice horizontal cloud that you see here is horizontal to the horizon line and is also parallel to the gradational line that we see here. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, if this image were shot and the sky were consistent all the way across, this image would not be nearly as powerful because it would look much more two-dimensional. So any element that helps move that eye across, and here some nice, strong physical and tonal and some perspective eye lines. We've looked at some images that have some really good, strong eye lines that work and contribute to the dynamic nature of the image. Let's take a look at a few images where the eye lines are not so great. Now, when you first look at this image, you go, oh, Taz has some great eye lines. Look at these trees pointing towards the sky. True enough, and this image has actually, some good potential. But if you follow this eye line all the way down, it starts about here, right? Everything below this line right here is kind of like eye line interruptus, if you will, right? It's only the top two-thirds of this image really has a strong eye line in it. Everything down below here, because of the complexity, which we talked about before, really kind of destroys the eye line. So there is a physical eye line, but there's not much perspective here. There's no tonal eye line. So it all depends upon the physical. So it moves to the top two-thirds of the image, but not the bottom. All right. Another important thing to notice here is, remember, this image has vertical eye lines, even though they're interrupted. And look at the horizontal or landscape format of the image. They conflict with each other. Notice the horizontal framing does not augment, but actually competes with the vertical nature. So that's why this is not a particularly strong eye line. This image here, and I do love this image, particularly, again, the upper two-thirds of this image. There's some nice physical, strong eye lines here, particularly these beautiful aspen trees that are reaching towards the sky. But similar to the last image, it's the top two-thirds that really works. The lower two-thirds, not so much. Because of the lack of simplicity, the overall complexity here, again, we have an interruption of the eye lines as they get to the lower third of the image. So upper portion is very nice, and we do have a nice match between the vertical formatting of the image and the vertical eye lines. But the lower third kind of destroys it a little bit. And this image I like to show because it's really an example of eye lines that are potentially there but really don't finish it. The strongest eye line in this image is the beach eye line, but notice it gets lost back here because of the similar tones. There's almost no eye line here because of so much complexity. There's some potential eye lines in the sky, but there's really not enough tonal difference, and it gets lost behind this ridge. There's not enough tonal differentiation between the sky and the mountains here. So yeah, an example of where eye lines could exist, but there's really not enough separation and continuity for the eye lines to really work. So the complexity, again, interrupts the eye lines. And here we have an interesting sequence of similar-looking images where we have, mountains and waves. And when we look at the potential eye lines here, not a lot of tonal separation between these two, so it's not strong. There is foreground, middle ground, and background, but it's interrupted by this complexity. This image is better in that we do have, somewhat of a strong eye line here, but the wave is just all broken up and crashing, so you lack of continuity. And, of course, this last image, which is the color version of the portfolio image, which is ultimately black and white, works really, really well because we have these nice, strong eye lines here and the beautiful eye line along the top of the wave. And you'll notice I was very careful to make sure that this eye line up here continued all the way through, even this spray here. So this has very strong eye lines physically, and there's foreground, middle ground, and background. And in the black and white version of the image, which we've seen, it's even more impressive. So when it all comes together, good composition, good simple image, good asymmetry, and you've got good physical eye lines, tonal eye lines, everything working well together, then you end up with a very powerful, visibly dynamic image.